Now, when these reward posters will be published, I mentioned earlier about, we talk about people of African descent, it's important to restore that sense of humanity, because if we're not looking at people of African descent as human beings, we're not going to give people of African descent credit for having the intelligence and the ingenuity to create this network to freedom. So when you would look at war posters like this, you can see a person's humanity in there. So for example, if you look at the first line in this poster, it says, a man that's full height, very erect, his face is a little thin. What does very erect tell you about this person?
Tall.
Tall. What else does it tell you?
He probably didn't work in the fields being bent over all day.
Exactly. And then some of you may have served in the military.
I did.
And okay, so I'm sure when you have your military uniform on, you stand at attention or you stand erect, right? And when a person is standing with that posture, what does that indicate about how they feel about themselves?
I would say proud. Proud.
You have a sense of pride, you have some esteem. And they're telling you that in the first line, that this person, even though that they've been enslaved for 40 years of their life, they have some sense of pride and esteem. The next line, it tells you that he calls himself Washington Reed. And that's important because it tells you that he's defining himself and he has a sense of self-determination and power. Because when you're enslaved, you're just given a name in an arbitrary way to designate you as the property of the person that owned you. You're not given a name that your great-grandmother had or your great-aunt had in order to continue the legacy of your people. You're given a name to designate you as somebody's property. Because if you venture somewhere off of the plantation, or if you're given a pass to go from one plantation to the next, and somebody asks you your name, they're going to know who owns you. So the fact that he names himself tells you that he disconnects with that legacy and he has the power to define himself, which also implies that he was given a name at one particular point in his life journey of 40 years old, but he shedded that name in order to define himself, to disconnect not only from that history and trauma, but possibly the location and the geographic area where he might have been enslaved at. So it's a protective thing as well. So if you're enslaved in Georgia and you make it to a free state and someone asks you, where'd you come from? You might say, I'm from Alabama. I'm from Mississippi. I'm from somewhere else. You're not usually going to tell people where exactly you came from, and you're probably going to have a different name because they put names on those wanted posters. And sometimes on those wanted posters, it will say answers to the name of Bill, almost like an animal. The same way that an animal would answer to a name, they would actually put that on these reward posters. Answers to the name of Bill, answers to the name of Mary, right? But at the same time, again, you can see elements of recognizing a person's humanity. It says that he's probably well-dressed. And usually when you see images of enslaved people, they are not well-dressed. Possibly takes with him an ivory-headed cane. Ivory was expensive during that time period. It's still expensive today. So he had access to some resources and wealth. And then in one of the last lines, it says that he is of good address. What does that tell you about him? That he's of good address.
He speaks well.
Well,
So if you speak well, what does that say?
You're educated.
You have some access to education. You can read and write. Not only can he do that, but you look down in like the third paragraph, it says Matilda, the second child, 6 years old, is bright. And then Malcolm, the youngest, that's 4 years old, is equally as bright. So those are common qualities and characteristics of enslaved people. And as common qualities and characteristics, oftentimes parents would not want people to know how intelligent their child was. When Harriet Tubman was 5 and 6 years old, which would be today kindergarten age, she was being leased out to work at a neighboring plantation as a child. And because of her high level of intelligence, her enslaver saw that as value that was brought to his plantation that he could actually monetize. And oftentimes parents wouldn't want enslavers to know how intelligent their children were because they were striving to protect them from being leased out as well as sold, because now it raises your value as an object, right?